Caitlin called out to the kids and reminded them to turn off the television. As they ambled toward the dining room, Mitch poked Casey in the ribs and took off running when she yelped. They chased each other around the table before finally taking their seats, panting and giggling. Caitlin stood so she could more easily cut the chicken into portions. Both Mitch and Caitlin favored the legs and thighs, while Casey and Tanner preferred the white meat. Rice and salad were passed around while Mitch pestered Tanner about the contents of the Walmart bag he'd left near the door. "I brought Jenga," he answered, "in case you wanted to play at the dinner." Casey shot him a skeptical look. "Jenga? Do you know the game?" "I know how to play," Casey said. "It's just that the last time I played, I was probably in 3rd grade. It's not just for kids. My buddies and I played it overseas when we were deployed." "Cool," Mitch said. Casey wrinkled her nose. "It's still a child's game." "Then you should have no trouble beating me, right?" Casey's eyes lit up, and as they began to eat, the conversation flowed easily. Caitlin asked for updates on school. Casey announced that the midterms were so easy as to almost be a joke, while Mitch said that he'd begun reading Where the Red Fern Grows during quiet time. He asked Tanner if they could play Frisbee again after dinner before adding that he also wanted to show Tanner all the carvings he made. Casey told a funny story about Camille, that she frantically searched her backpack looking for her phone and had begun to cry hysterically only to realize that her phone was in her jacket pocket when it suddenly began to ring. When Tanner asked Caitlin about the craziest diagnosis she ever had to make, she thought for a moment before finally relating a story about a female patient whose initial symptoms were slight bruising on his stomach and a vivid hallucination where she imagined that spiders were crawling over her skin. Caitlin had learned during her exam that she traveled frequently to Mexico. She'd also noticed that the patient looked 20 years younger than she actually was, with glowing skin and nary a wrinkle. "I was a resident at the time," Caitlin went on. "First we thought it was a B12 deficiency, but when she started to bleed from her nose and ears, we knew something else was causing it. We ran tests for everything from Huntington's to multiple sclerosis. In the end, the attending finally diagnosed her with leprosy." Tanner blinked. "You mean like leprosy in the Bible leprosy?" "Diffuse lamentaceous leprosy, also known as pretty leprosy." Casey wrinkled her nose. "How can leprosy be pretty? Doesn't it make body parts fall off?" "Wait," Mitch cut in. "Body parts fall off?" "Only in serious cases, if left untreated. But pretty leprosy in the early stages smooths the skin and erases wrinkles." "Maybe people should get that instead of Botox," Casey snarked. "Ha ha," Caitlin said. Anyway, the diagnosis was a big deal at the time. It's not like doctors in the U.S. see leprosy regularly. But in the end, we treated the patient and she was fine. "She kept all her body parts?" Mitch asked. "All of them," Casey assured him. "On the downside, she got wrinkles." She wasn't happy about that. After dinner, Tanner threw the Frisbee with Mitch while Caitlin cleaned up. Casey followed them out and joined the game. Eventually, Caitlin came out to the porch to watch. So when asked if she liked to join them, she passed. I'll just sip my wine and watch you three and have fun. Eventually, Tanner begged off, and they all went back inside. Casey grabbed the Walmart bag near the door and had already opened the box before taking a seat at the kitchen table. She quickly reviewed the rules as a refresher, then stacked the blocks into a tower. Using one hand, take out any block that's not in the top row and stack it on top, she said to Mitch. If the tower falls, you lose. It was clear to Tanner that Casey was intent on winning. Whenever it was her turn, she took her time to gently poke various blocks before making her choice. Mitch was less selective, and in the first game, he was the one who toppled the tower. In the next game, Caitlin toppled it. Mitch lost the third game, and to Tanner's chagrin, he lost the fourth one. He would have blamed the wine. He finished nearly 2 glasses by then. But Caitlin had the same amount, and her hand seemed to be growing steadier, most likely because she was a doctor, or at least that's what Tanner told himself. Through it all, there was a good-natured trash talk as well as laughter. And when Tanner finally put the blocks back in the box, Caitlin looked at the clock before reminding Mitch that he had to take his bath to start to get ready for bed. But what about the carving that haven't shown Mr. Tanner yet? Just grab a few of them, okay? It's getting late. Mitch vanished from the table and came trotting back down the steps less than a minute later with his arms full. On the kitchen table, he set them up right. A cougar, a dog, a donkey, a duck, an elephant, and a giraffe, among others. Wow, Tanner said, impressed. You've got your own zoo. I know, right? Is this one you? Casey asked, pointing to one of them. No, Mitch protested. It's a dog. It kind of looks like you, Mom. Casey, Caitlin warned. I just said that because it was cute, Casey said. Mitch might not be cute yet, but one day he will be. You're not cute either. I think this one is you, he said, picking up one of them. That makes sense. I have been told I'm a bit of a unicorn. It's a donkey, not a unicorn, Mitch cried. See, there's no horn, and it has big ears just like you. I think that's enough for now, Caitlin said. Go take your bath. Mitch nodded before scooping up the animals. Good night, Bubble Butt, he sang over his shoulder as he disappeared up the stairs. I'm going upstairs too, Casey said. I mean, I enjoy pretending it's the 1950s as much as the next modern teenage girl, but the texts are piling up. A minute later, Tanner and Caitlin were alone at the table. It had been a good night tonight, he said in the sudden quiet. It was fun, she agreed. It's easier when Casey's on her best behavior. Want to sit outside on the porch, he asked. It's a beautiful night. Is there any wine left in the bottle? He reached for it and topped off both of their glasses before they moved outside. Seated in the rocking chair on the porch, they could see the neighbors' homes illuminated from within, the moonlight bathing the yard in a silver glow. From one of the homes, he could hear the faint sound of music playing. Do you sit out here much? Hardly ever, she admitted. That's more my parents' thing. They used to sit on the front porch after work on the weekends. In fact, these rockets were among their wedding gifts. But sitting on the front porch wasn't something that George liked to do. Even on rare moments, he was around. You got to admit it's kind of nice. It is. She rested her head on the back of her rocking chair, gazing at him from beneath lower lids. I'm really glad you came tonight, she said softly. Me too. The kids like you, even Casey, which is kind of astounding. Why? She doesn't like any of the guys I dated after the divorce. Not there were all that many. That's normal, isn't it? A lot of kids fasten fantasize about their parents getting back together, so it makes sense that they wouldn't like anyone new. I guess she took a sip of wine. I want to ask you something, but I also want you to know that I'll understand if you don't want to talk about it. Ask whatever you like. It's about your time in the military, she began. He nodded. What do you want to know? I don't know. Why you joined, what it was like, why you left, and whether it messed me up, right? I don't think it messed you up, she protested. Then, did it? He gave a wry smile. I don't think so, but as you've already learned, my life choices haven't exactly been typical. He stared up at the sky, collecting his thoughts. By the time I was 13 or 14, I knew that college wasn't for me. And because of my granddad, the Army seemed like a natural fit. I was young and cocky, and I believed I was bulletproof. So I enlisted, and I quickly figured out that the Army, in some ways, just like any other bureaucracy, some of those who outrank you are great, others are idiots, but in the end, you're just a cog in the machine. Then came 9/11. I don't know if you remember that those first years were like after the towers fell, but there were a massive surge of patriotism, especially in the military, and it felt as though I suddenly understood my purpose. And for a long time I did, which was why I ended up doing the Delta route after the Rangers. The U.S. had been attacked, and I was tasked with eliminating the infrastructure and people that made the attack possible. So that's what I did, night after night. And I felt like I was doing the most important job in the world. When he paused, she stopped rocking and turned in her seat to face him. But the mission involved, he said with a shrug, after a few years. It wasn't just about the Taliban or Al-Qaeda or Bin Laden. It was suddenly about Iraq. We were sent to find weapons of mass destruction, but there weren't any. Then we were supposed to get Iraq on track toward democracy, and that didn't work out well either. Then we were supposed to help establish a stable government in Afghanistan, which meant breaking bread with tribal leaders in villages who might have shot up your camp earlier that same morning. It got confusing. The goalposts weren't just moving, they were continually being shifted into entirely different stadiums. With every new deployment, there were new ideas, and eventually the whole thing sort of lost its luster. A lot of my friends began stepping away, and eventually I did the same. Do you regret leaving? He leaned his head back, pondering the best way to explain it. When I got out, I knew I was making the right decision. I knew I was done. But the passage of time changes things. Now I can't help thinking that those were some of the best years of my life. I wouldn't trade them for anything. Smiling. Seriously, Kayla's expression was doubtful. Unless you've been there, I'm not sure you can ever really understand it, but the truth is you feel very much alive when you're undertaking missions with people you trust. There's a deep camaraderie, absolute unity of purpose, and overwhelming intensity with actual human lives on the line. Factor in massive adrenaline dumps, and war becomes its own addictive drug. I know I'm not the first one to describe it that way, but it's true. Even if you don't want to admit it to yourself, I think that's part of the reason a lot of veterans have trouble adjusting to life in the civilian world. There's just nothing comparable. He paused to take a sip of wine, feeling her eyes on him. I'm not trying to make it seem romantic, because it wasn't. It was dirty and stressful and frequently boring. And when you're in the thick of it, all you want to do is get out of there. You dream about spending time with your grandparents or enjoying the simple things in life. Activities like mowing the lawn or kicking back to watch a football game on TV with friends take on almost spiritual significance. But then, when you do get back from deployment, you realize that those things aren't enough to fill the void created by what you left behind. I think I understand, Caitlin said at the moment, and it makes sense. That part of you would miss it, which I assume explains why you decided to work for, you said too, because suburban life in America wasn't for you. That was part of it for sure, but the other part had to do with guilt. I lost a lot of friends, as I already told you. But by the end, I realized that nothing to be done in Afghanistan really mattered in the long run. Most of the clans and tribes still considered us invaders and infidels, no matter how much we were trying to help them. To them, we were the bad guys. And I guess part of me wanted to make up for that by doing something good in the world. And now, what do you mean? How does suburban American life strike you now? It's hard for me to say. I was on vacation in Lahaina when COVID hit, so I stayed there for a few months, but it never really felt like home. Later, when I was with my grandma in Pensacola, that was its own sad situation, and again, it never felt like home. I'm just glad you're not haunted by what you went through in the same way that some of your friends were. Maybe, he said, but I'm not sure I consider myself normal either. What about you, though? Any battle scars you want to tell me about? Like my divorce, you mean? Do you want to tell me what happened? She was quiet for a moment. It was one of those things that worked until it didn't, she finally said. That's what I tell people. And there's a lot of truth to it. We were more like business partners by the end, as opposed to a couple. But the way it happened left me feeling worthless for a long time. She closed her eyes and sighed before glancing over at him. He left me for a Pilates instructor a few days before my 40th birthday. You're kidding. Nope. I remember kind of disassociating when he told me. I mean, the whole thing was such a cliche, even her name, Amber. He moved out that same night. Is that the one he married? It is, she said. I'll give it 10 years at the most. But that's just me, being the occasionally vengeful ex-wife. He smiled before she went on. But that was just the start of it. The divorce process was awful, too. He kept insisting on joint custody, with the kid moving from my house to his house every other weekend. But to my mind, he was using the kid as leverage to lower his property settlement. It's not that I didn't want the kids to see him or spend time with him, but his work meant that he was out of the house every day by 6:30 in the morning, and he usually didn't make it home until 7:30. Unlike me, he's on call at the hospital and even works 2 or 3 Saturdays a month, which meant the kids were with a nanny, not him, and they were struggling. So in the end, I caved. He got most of everything while I got primary physical custody of the kids. If there was anything positive at all about the experience, it was that I lost respect for him, which made it easier to finally move on. Sounds rough, he said. I already don't like him. Thanks, she said. She was quiet for a moment. As far as other scars, I think it's the same one all working mothers develop. This feeling that I'm failing, no matter what I do. When I'm at work, I wish I could be there more for my kids. When I'm with my kids, I feel like I'm wasting my education. It is complicated by the fact that work fills a need inside me, one distinct from my life as a mom. And that sometimes makes me feel guilty too. So lots of damage in your past. She laughed. At least I'm not living in Motel 6s. Excuse me, he said. I'm staying at the Hampton Inn. My mistake, she said, her voice teasing. And the kids, how are they doing with all of it now? I think they've gotten used to it. In all fairness, he does well at keeping in touch. He calls them regularly, sends them money and gifts, and they spend every other holiday and a month in summer with him. But he raised an eyebrow before she went on. Casey just threatened to go live with him next school year. He said he'd get her a car if she did. Do you think she was serious? I don't know. She's old enough to make the decision, so if she does want to go, I won't try to stop her. She'll stay, Tanner reassured her, but he could sense how powerless Caitlin felt. In time, she shook her head. Anyway, that's my story. Thank you for telling me, he said, meeting and holding her eyes. Caitlin was the first to look away. I should probably make sure Mitch is in bed, she said. Tanner nodded, and two of them rose from their seats and went inside while Caitlin went upstairs to check on Mitch. Tanner washed the wine glasses. By the time he dried them, she was coming back down the stairs. All good, she offered when she reached the kitchen. Would you like some coffee before you go, she asked. Decaf would be great, but only if you're having some. Caitlin prepped the coffee maker, then pulled out a pair of mugs from the cabinet. It didn't take long to brew, and Caitlin brought the mugs to the table. What are you doing tomorrow night, he asked. I have no idea, she responded, wrapping her hands around her mug. Why? Because I was hoping we could go to dinner again. I would have suggested Friday, but I heard Casey say she's going to a party. Caitlin waited for a moment before raising her eyes. I'm not sure that would be a good idea, she said, her voice soft. Tanner had a feeling he knew what she was going to say. I like you talking to you tonight. I realize how much I enjoy spending time with you. And if we go out again, I'll probably like you even more. And that scares me because you're going to be leaving town soon. And then after that, you'll be leaving the country. I'm not sure that's what I need in my life right now. He recognized the truth of what she was saying, even if it wasn't what he wanted to hear. I understand. But just know that, yes, if things were different, I'd love to see you again. I can't say that makes me feel any better, he said. I know, she said, and I'm sorry. He said into his coffee mug, then drained it. It's getting late, and you have to work tomorrow, which means I should probably get going. She seemed relieved, even if he noted a shadow of regret in her eyes. I'll walk you out. Tanner brought his cup to the sink and rinsed it. She set hers on the counter. As they started for the door, she paused. Don't forget to take your game, she reminded him. Oh, that's for the kids to keep, he said. Thank you. They descended the porch steps, heading toward his rental car. As he walked beside her, it struck him that those might be the last moments they spend together. A reality that felt strangely weighted. And yet, as they finally reached his car, he found himself turning toward her. When she met his gaze, he took a small step forward, his hand automatically reaching for her hip. He expected her to stop him, expected her to retreat. But she continued to hold his gaze as he moved even closer. He tugged gently, feeling as she responded by leaning toward him, their bodies slowly coming together. Her lips were soft and warm, and when his briefly met hers, he felt an electric charge run through him. He succumbed, then... Okay.
What's going on here?
Okay. Tanner losing himself completely in the glory of his sentenced skin, hollows of his neck. Right. When they finally separated, he seen both her longing and her sadness. Tanner, she whispered, and though he knew she meant it as goodbye, he couldn't bring himself to end it like this. Instead, he breathed the words he had been inside him. From the moment he'd first seen her. You're beautiful, Caitlin. She closed her eyes, and for a moment her face seemed to glow in the milky half-light of the moon. When her eyes drifted open, her pupils looked huge, hypnotic, casting a spell that he was powerless to resist. Okay, she said, her voice sounding almost dreamlike. Let's go to dinner tomorrow.
Shut the step in.
High five. Can I get a high five?
Yeah.
Oh, that was a long
In the morning?
chapter.
In the morning.
Let's do it.
Let's do it.